Welcome back to the program. President Donald Trump's approach to ending Russia's war against Ukraine has left European allies and Ukrainian officials worried they are being largely sidelined by the new administration as Washington and Moscow plan direct negotiations. Trump sent Secretary of State Marco Rubio, National Security Advisor Mike Waltz, and Special Envoy Steve Witkoff to Saudi Arabia for talks with their Russian counterparts.
What the president did not find acceptable was an endless war in Europe that was literally has turned into a meat grinder of people on both sides. So if you just think about just in a few months, President Trump has shifted the entire global conversation from not if the war is going to end, but just how it's going to end. And only President Trump can do that. And in the Oval Office, less than a week ago, both President Putin and President Zelensky both said to him, only you, President Trump, could drive this war to a conclusion.
President Trump forced European member states to increase funding on NATO during his first term, yet there is much more to be done as the U.S. sends 79% of NATO's budget from the U.S. Treasury. Texas indicated Europe should ramp up its financial and military responsibilities in Ukraine. He also ruled out deployment of U.S. troops in Ukraine after any deal is signed by Russia. U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance reiterated the same point, stating Brussels should step up in a big way to provide for its own defense. Joining me now to discuss is retired Army captain and author of The Spirit of a True Patriot, the inspiring story of retired Captain Douglas J. Ernest. Douglas J. Ernest, welcome back to the show.
Stacy, thank you very much, and it's great to be with you again.
Oh, wow. We have such amazing updates here. I assume you viewed some of the remarks from Vladimir Zelensky as he's been touring around in media trying to make the case for his presence at these negotiations.
Yeah, great question. You know, most of the people I've talked to that I used to serve with in the military are not big fans of Volodymyr Zelensky. You know, I've spoke about this on, over 50 of these interviews, and that is he presents himself as this great military strategist that just came off the battlefield and is fatigued, when in essence, he's just a politician that used to be a drag queen TV show host. So it's a farce, it's a facade. And he doesn't like what's transpiring because he's being left out, because most likely if true elections were given in this corrupt nation of Ukraine, he would not be elected to that position. So obviously he's not happy. He's giving us disparaging remarks as President Trump and the administration has worked so hard to achieve these little successes and get us closer and closer. If you saw NSA Leader Waltz, he talked about just giving not if the war will end, but when the war will end. This is huge. We've been talking about this for 3 years as we have 1 million people wounded and injured and killed. We have just massive infrastructure damage, over hundreds of billion dollars in infrastructure, and we're finally getting to a place of potential peace. And the naysayers are trying to throw gasoline on the fire when we're very close to getting this over with.
So as it pertains to this big negotiation, what are you expecting to see, Douglas?
To see just Putin and his team come to the table, give a little bit of negotiations. Trump is the master of the art of the deal, and I'm sure has instructed his people to just be able to get some type of progress. Once we can get the inertia moving and get the other side to start giving in to a couple of concessions, we can then move on to bringing the other team to the table. And another thing was so important. We've seen in the media the last day or so about them talking about Ukraine not being involved. Ukraine should not be involved. These two have been at war. These nations have been adversaries for 3 years, and we have 1 million people dead or injured. They need to be worked on at each side from a superpower such as ourselves to be able to bring them together and put them on the same wavelength so that we can figure out a way to bring this to the end of the war quickly and swiftly.
So last question here. What most Americans are concerned about are boots on the ground in Ukraine. And obviously we don't want that. Secretary Hegseth has said that's not going to happen. J.D. Vance, our vice president, said that he wouldn't remove any options off of the table. Obviously, the Russians know that the temperature here in the United States. Do you have any thoughts there?
That's an absolute no-no. We would not want to participate in facilitating World War III. We saw the Prime Minister of the UK on Saturday come out and said that they were prepared to put boots on the ground. The most ludicrous statement. Their army is worn out. It's not funded well. They don't have the personnel. You can see the massive death from the type of trench warfare we're experiencing in these nations. Just a ludicrous statement. We are not going to put our sisters and brothers in harm's way and send them over to a senseless war. We've already funded this war for 3 years. This war is on the backbone of the American taxpayers. We paid for this war, and we are not going to send our kids, our children, our soldiers to go fight in this war. The American people will not stand for it, and Donald Trump is a lot smarter than that. I plan to see concessions, a little bit of a slow moving wheel to be able to bring both sides of the table and put an end to this as quickly as possible.
I think that's so important. And there's that going on. There's the kind of dust up that's brewing in Taiwan over America's support of the Taiwanese people and their desire to remain independent of mainland China. And then there's also the issue going on with, Ukraine is important, but we have the Middle East and the resolution in Gaza. Hostages released a little early. They're trying to ramp up because Hamas is afraid of President Trump and his statements. I got to tell you, Douglas, I was really disturbed to learn that the Bibas family, the mom and the 2 young children, they're going to be returned deceased. They are not alive anymore. I attribute this loss to the Biden administration and their intransigence, their refusal to negotiate. What did you think when you saw the announcement today?
Absolute atrocity. And just like you just mentioned, I'm a firm believer that the Biden administration had foreign policy that was just botched for years. And Joe Biden wasn't making the decisions behind the scene. His staffers were. And these absolutely crazy decisions that were has caused the deaths of tens of thousands of people around the globe. And you just added 3 more. It's a very sad case. The family members are devastated. It brings devastation to the teams that are trying to put these deals together to bring peace and hopefully future prosperity to both nations as they rebuild their land, their infrastructure, and help facilitate some of the healing. But absolute, just awful news. We're saddened by it, but we want to keep moving forward so that both sides can bring it to an end, because if you don't stop it, we're going to hear about more death and destruction and the end of the war. And like I mentioned in the book over and over and over, you always want to find a way to bring peace. Even if you have to find a way to negotiate, give a little bit, tit for tat, you have to find a way to bring peace. Because if you don't, other nations become involved, stronger players come to the table, and it just sort of spins out of hand and it doesn't stop. We saw this in Gulf War II. We saw this in Afghanistan. You think you're going to get in and get out, and then it takes 20 years. And when you do get out, it's botched. It's an absolute disaster, and people die because of the bad decision making of the leader. We have to get out. We have to get quick. We have to find a way to bring all these adversaries to the table to make a deal and end it as quickly as possible.
Your warning should go out as a cautionary advisement to every single world leader, but specifically to those involved in this negotiation. I couldn't agree with you more. Douglas J. Ernest, retired Army captain and author. Good to see you tonight, sir.
Thank you, Stacy. A pleasure speaking with you today. Have a great week.
Have a great week. And quick update here on the story that I just mentioned. You have President Trump angering China by supporting an independent Taiwan. What's actually happened here is the State Department has removed the statement that used to be on the website during the Biden administration that says that the United States does not support an independent Taiwan. With the removal of that statement, that's an announcement of a shift in policy from the United States back to the Trump doctrine that was in existence during his first term. Taiwan is actually independent at this point, and they're a primary chip maker for our automobiles and other electronics. And it is absolutely necessary that we continue to support them as we try to stand up our own manufacturing base for chips here in the United States, notwithstanding the fact that we actually support their desire for freedom, because they are a wonderful people group that are determined to have a democracy and functioning republic as opposed to being under the boot of China. So it is a good thing to see them supported again by this presidential administration. Coming up after the break, we discuss the latest CEOs breaking with the Democrat Party. It has now become almost de rigueur. It's kind of a thing to announce that you were once a Democrat, but now you support the logic and common sense of the Trump movement. We're going to see more about that. We'll have some Club Random clips for you from Bill Maher as well. Coming up next on Salem News Channel. Stay with us.